Think I'm ready. Okay. What's up, everybody? This is Aaron Yoon coming at you from New York City, um, the notorious New York City. We are officially the most infected state in the country. And my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who are my neighbors in this great city, in this great state, and who are dealing with the unfortunate tragedy of the COVID-19 pandemic right now. My heart goes out to them, of course, and so hope everyone else who is healthy stays healthy, be safe out there. I just want to start off by saying that. Today it's become a kind of a theme. Today is Monday, so we're going to talk about Monday mentality. Mentality. Okay. Sometimes I say Monday mindset, sometimes I say Monday mentality. It really kind of depends. Who knows what the difference is. But the idea, one of the things that is very, very common is the idea of what does it take to succeed? How can I succeed? How can I minimize failure? How can I how do I increase my chances of success, right? And there's always in that kind of whereas how can I type of questions, or what does it take, how can I succeed, what does it take to succeed, whatever it means for you. One of the things about this is, as strong as this statement is, it's way stronger than like, can I succeed at all? Where it's a kind of a yes or no type of question, and you leave a little bit of room for doubt where it's a 50-50 chance. This is a much stronger statement of like, oh, how can I succeed? How can this become possible? Not is it possible, but how can I make this possible? If you were to take this to the next level, though, I would rephrase this. I'm going to change colors altogether and say, how can I make it impossible to fail? The idea of failure is something that that we face head on, and it instills a lot of fear in a lot of us. The idea of failure. Obviously, if we were to take a look at failure and success, one cannot exist without the other. There is an idea of looking at success as just or looking at failure as just success that hasn't happened yet. Once you've failed enough, you will success is inevitable. Yes, there is that kind of a mentality as well, but this is just another side of that, right? So how can I make it impossible to fail? So one of the ways that I do this is with the stock market. Since this is predominantly a personal finance channel, I mostly talk about the stock market and red money, everything in the financial markets here, right? And so for the most part, if the stock market is crashing, the question of make it impossible to fail is, how do I make money, abbreviate money, when markets go down? It's obvious that everybody does well in the stock market when the entire market is going up, right? A rising tide lifts all ships, if you will, right? So for the past maybe 12 years or so, prior to February of 2020, it's been a rock and roll party. All right, the stock market has gone up and up and up. It seems like there was no end in sight. Our president took full credit for it. We're at all-time highs like every day last year, right? Especially towards the end last year. But now it seems like life is completely different, and we have a new way of living now. We don't have what the stock market has crashed. Anywhere at its lowest point, over 30%, it's crashed. So the question now that you have to ask is I don't want you to be ever at the effect of a market crash. So if most people invest and they are hoping that a crash never comes, when if you ask them to think hard enough, they'll get to the realization that it's just a matter of time for our market to crash. It's just not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The market is going to crash at some point. The crash of 2020 isn't going to be the last one that you live through in maybe another 10 years or so. I don't know when exactly, but there will be another one. And if you just keep doing the same thing, leaving your money in the market and hope it recovers, you are setting yourself up for disappointment in a decade's time. So you're setting yourself up for failure, right? You haven't learned from your mistakes. But if you start asking the question, how do I make money even when the markets go down? Now we're talking about, okay, if I can make money, if I can be profitable whether the market goes up or the market goes down, now failure is impossible. Now money growth is guaranteed almost, because I'm not really allowed to guarantee anything in the financial market, so I really shouldn't say that, but it makes it impossible to fail, right? It makes it so that you won't be fully exposed to any crashes. Another way that when I was at the hedge fund, again, I've been, for those of you that don't know my background, I worked at a $20 billion hedge fund for about 5 years. And I'm not by any means a billionaire myself, but I did get to watch billionaires in action at the highest level. I had a front row seat, and I got to watch them. And one of the things that they are always thinking about is risk management. Always, right? That seems to be the name of the game. So another way this shows up at the highest level is the thinking of this is way more specific to the industry. This is way more Wall Street bound, right? But the idea of a hedge fund is to always be within X percent. This is usually around 10. Usually around 10. That doesn't look very clear. This is usually around 10%. Okay, but different risk management parameters might have that be a different percentage. So that's a variable, but I'm going to use 10 as a standard example. So I want to always be within 10% of my highs. So that means that no matter what happens, I am never going to lose 10% of my all-time high. So let's say that at the peak of 2020, when it was around the end of January or so, when it seemed like we were going to have another tremendous year, a crazy record-breaking year, just like 2019 was. It's from whatever that was. Let's say that was that highest point was $100,000 for you. How do you set this up? How do you set up your 401k, your IRA, your investment account, or what have you, so that you never lose more than 90? So you had 100k at the highs. You never lose more than 90. Most people right now they've lost. Sorry, what? You never lose more than 10%. No matter what happens, right? And if you have this in your mind as like a circuit breaker, if you will, this is something that forces you to have a new standard of what you'll accept as an acceptable loss. If you're just riding the wave up and down with the market, you're gonna end up like most people with like a 20 to 30% loss right now, somewhere in between. Right, it's kind of fluctuating. It's found its range anywhere from minus 20% to minus 30% right now. Right, ever since last week. It's rallied a little bit and then it went down again, and it's just kind of in that range right now. So you are in minus 20 to 30% if you just kind of left it alone. But if you start thinking about what can I do to always be within 10 so I never lose more than 10%, then you're guaranteed to be in good shape no matter what. You'll never have an experience. If you manage your risk this way, if you manage your losses this way, you'll never have to face what most people faced in 2008 where they lost half, 50%. You'll never have to deal with that situation if you pay attention and set this to be your new normal. That way it'll be impossible to fail. One tip that I'll leave you with is that the stock market actually has this built in. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but it hasn't happened last week, but in a couple of weeks prior, the stock market has limit downs and limit ups. In other words, if the stock market falls too much within a day, I think the limit is 7% or so during the regular trading hours. If it falls more than 7%, it can't fall anymore. It's like the circuit breakers go off. It's as if you used too much electricity in your house, and the circuit breaker goes off, and all of the electricity in that area gets shut down, as to prevent electrical fire or some kind of explosion or something. Same situation in the stock market. We haven't had it in the last couple of days, thankfully, but if the stock market goes down way too much, it'll stop. No one's allowed to trade for about 15 minutes. Right? It's like, okay, it's like the stock market is calling time out, and you can't. You're not allowed to trade for about 15 minutes. If this happens during the overnight, then during the overnight sessions, it means that you can't trade anymore until, or rather, it can't go any further down until the next trading day, right? Until 9:30 Eastern the next day. But during that time, it can go back up. It will allow it to go back up, but this is like a floor. It's established a floor. So here's the thing. Even the stock market itself has a limit to how much it's going to allow itself to lose. That's not to say that you should feel safe, because in your personal account, if you're not following the stock market, if you have your own set of different kinds of assets, so I'm talking about this is like for the indexes. If you have other types of assets in your IRA or in your investment portfolio, and you don't have a limit in your mind constantly, asking yourself, okay, like if what's the amount that I'm willing to lose before I just cut my losses, and I just like, okay, and I establish a floor. What's your circuit breaker number? For the hedge fund that I worked with, it was around 10%. For the stock market, the indexes itself, it's around 7, right? You got to have one of these numbers to make it impossible for you to lose more than that, so that you preserve your losses, so that you don't have to spend years and years and years recovering from the damage. For example, back in 2008, we had one of the worst crashes ever. From the high, the stock market lost about 15%. For you to have gotten back to that break-even point took about 4 or 5 years. All that time could have been saved. You could have had 4 or 5 years worth of gains if you had just stopped, set up the floor here, not traded at all, or not invested at all, or invested in something else besides the stock market for 2008 and maybe about half of 2009, and then resumed trading. The system itself does this. Why don't you do this? This is an absolute must. It's an example of how you can start thinking about, how do I make it impossible to fail? How do I make it impossible? To me, failure would be defined as running out of money in retirement. How do I make it impossible for this to happen? Utterly impossible. That's the question that I'm here to address and help you focus on, and find creative ways that you'll enjoy practicing in order to put this into effect. One way when it comes to red money, when it comes to investing in the financial markets, is you have to have that circuit breaker mechanism in there. If it's not a mental mechanism, then at least consult. Well, shoot me a DM. I'll set you up with a framework that kind of makes it really easy for you. But if you're a trader yourself, if you're an investor yourself, you have to have that number. Remind yourself of that number when you're going into an investment. It's absolutely key. This is one way that you can ensure that it's impossible to run out of money in retirement. So that's about it for today's video. The idea, this is just one example of how I practice the mentality, Monday mentality, of impossible to fail. There are many other ways to do this. I'm curious about how you guys practice the impossible to fail mentality. Drop a comment below. I'm curious to know, and shoot me a DM. Make sure you like the page. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment as to how you practice impossible to fail. Today was YoonTube Live, Monday Mentality. Thanks for joining me. See you guys tomorrow.